Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we had day 8 of the Global Chess League in London and we had some pretty exciting games. As every day I was covering the games both on my Twitch and YouTube channels. But anyway, let's have a look at what happened. Alright, so this game between Viswanathan Anand, 5-time world champion, against Firouzja was definitely promising to be an exciting game. And Vichy opened up with the move 1e4, and it's always the question what Firouzja is gonna do. Sometimes he likes to play the Sicilian, sometimes he likes to play solid with e4, e5, but in this game he plays c6, aiming to go for the Caro-Kann defense with d5 on the next move. But Vichy goes d4, and here Firouzja goes for something quite unusual. Instead of going for d5, he plays the move d6. Alright, so what is the idea? Knight to c3, and queen to c7. So with these first couple of moves, he's making it very clear that he wants a combative game. He wants to keep all the pieces on the board. He doesn't want a boring symmetrical game with trades. He wants to fight. He wants to win with the black pieces. Alright, so with this setup, he is allowing Vichy to gain more space. And Vichy does so with the move f4, and Firouzja goes e5, grabbing his fair share of the center as well. Alright, so knight f3 by Vichy, putting more pressure on e5. And now knight to d7, adding some support to the e5 pawn. Alright, so bishop to d3, knight gf6, castles, and bishop e7. And here, we kind of see what I was getting to earlier. Again, Firouzja is keeping all of the pieces on the board. Yes, white does have more space, but he's banking that he will get some chances later on. Alright, so king h1, castles, and here Anand goes queen to e1, aiming to go queen g3, or maybe queen h4 and try to go for an attack on the king side. Alright, so Firouzja takes on d4, Anand recaptures, and now he goes rook to e8, clearing the f8 square for his bishop. So his bishop can go here, and he can also go g6 and bishop g7 to activate it later. Alright, so queen g3, bishop f8, adding some support to the g7 pawn, opening up the file for his rook, bishop d2, and g6. g6, the computer is giving this a question mark, which seems a little bit harsh. I mean, he's aiming to go bishop g7 if he encounters bishop, but perhaps it gave Anand some strong attacking opportunities. Maybe around here, Anand should have continued with a move like f5, followed by queen h4 and bishop g5. That could have given him a strong attack. But instead he goes knight f3. A bit more timid, and I guess he was aiming to go for the e5 push. Bishop g7 by Firouzja, rook ae1, again, reinforcing this pawn push. And Firouzja goes for his own counterplay with pawn to b5. Aiming to go b4, push the knight away, so that the d4 pawn loosens up. Alright, so here Vichy plays the move a3, which stops b4, but here black goes a5, and b4 is coming anyway, right? And now if b4 happens after takes, black will also have the a file, which can be useful for his rook. Right, so around here Vichy probably should have continued with e5, but the lines get pretty sharp after takes, knight h5, attacking the queen. And so he goes queen h4 instead, improving his queen, but now Firouzja continues with b4, attacking the knight. And here we see what I was talking about earlier. After takes, again, the knight steps away, but here Firouzja has that open file for his rook, which, again, can always be useful. And he goes bishop to a6, offering the trade of bishops, so that if white trades the pawn on e4, again, becomes weaker. Alright, so Vichy trades on a6, Firouzja recaptures, and goes e5, breaking in the center, attacking the knight, but black can just take. White recaptures, and black takes the pawn on e5. Alright, so after takes, we see now Vichy taking, and taking on b4. So the material's even, but also if we look at the clock, Firouzja up 5 minutes, Vichy definitely under some pressure here, especially after Firouzja's next move, rook to a1, creating a very unpleasant pin on the first rank for white. Queen e2 could be a big threat, hitting the rook and the knight on d1. And so Vichy goes rook to e1, but alright, he's down to 2 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock, also under pressure on the board. Firouzja goes queen to h5, excellent move, attacking the knight. And perhaps here the knight should have gone to e3 or to c3, but Vichy goes to f2, and now Firouzja takes and follows up with queen to e2, a threatening checkmate in one move with queen to f1. So again, the pressure is building here on the white position. It's very tough to hold on. And here Vichy goes wrong with knight to h3, aiming to block on g1 with the knight. But Firouzja finds bishop to f8, excellent move, hitting the queen and aiming to activate the bishop this way. He had to go queen f5 here. Still, it's a very tough position for white. White will be down a pawn after queen takes c2, also down a lot of time on the clock. But after queen d2, Firouzja gave a check on g1 and followed up with bishop to c5. And there's absolutely nothing White can do against queen takes g1, checkmate, so Vichy resigns. So nice win for Firouzja. He's in great shape in this tournament. He is on 6.5 out of 8, and the only loss he had in this tournament against Hikaru was a very unnecessary one. He was up a pawn in the rooking game, blundered into a lost king and pawn game, and yeah, that was his only loss of the tournament. Other than that, he's been crushing it. All right, so let's see what happened. We also had another game today. It's probably not a game you guys care too much about. I mean, it was between these two guys, let's see, Hikaru and Magnus. Well, you guys might have heard of them before. It's always exciting when they face off. And today, Hikaru had the white pieces. Earlier on, Magnus had the white pieces. That game ended in a draw. So I was very interested to see what Hikaru was going to do with the white pieces. And Hikaru goes for a surprise on move 1. He goes for pawn to b3. Also an approach to keep all of the pieces on the board. Maybe aiming to take Magnus out of book very early on. And maybe he just wanted to have some fun. Right, bishop b2 on the next move, so e5, bishop b2, attacking the pawn. Magnus goes knight f6, and here e3. White aiming to go bishop b5 to put pressure on the knight. Now the main moves here for black are knight f6, d5 is a move as well, grabbing a lot of space in the center. But Magnus goes for pawn to g6, aiming to Fianchetto's bishop to perhaps neutralize some of the pressure along this diagonal. And here Hikaru goes for a very interesting approach. He goes d4. Sacrificing a pawn because after Magnus takes, now he goes knight to f3, hitting the pawn on d4. Obviously, black cannot take on e3 as white takes on h8, and yeah, that's costing black a full rook. So here black can go bishop g7, but white takes on d4, and maybe white can hope for a very small advantage. But instead, Magnus goes bishop b4 check, as this check is quite awkward for white to block. I mean, hey, if you go c3, black can take here, and black goes up a pawn. So Hikaru goes knight bd2. And here Magnus misses a big opportunity. What he could have done here is take on e3, sacrificing the rook in the corner. But if white takes, black can take on d2. And here we see that black is only down in exchange for a pawn. And after the move f6, this bishop on h8 can easily be trapped with king f7 and knight g7, knight ge7 coming next. So that was a nice opportunity for Magnus, but instead he goes knight to f6, returning the pawn on d4, which Hikaru takes with his knight. But now his idea was to go knight e4, putting pressure on the pinned piece. So Hikaru is forced to go knight f3 back to defend the knight, also attacking the rook in the corner, and so Magnus castles. And here Hikaru comes up with an excellent move. He goes queen to c1, aiming to go c3 and break the pin on the knight on d2. So Magnus goes d5, grabbing space in the center, c3, and bishop e7 back. And perhaps here Hikaru should have continued with a move like bishop e2 or bishop b5, just continuing his development. Castles, and then maybe c4 later on to, again, open up that bishop. But he played c4 right away, which was perhaps a little bit too hasty. Now Magnus decided to trade on d2, Hikaru recaptured, and Magnus took on c4. Hikaru recaptured, and here, the game is a little bit dry. Already one pair of knights has been traded off, 2 pairs of pawns, and now Magnus goes bishop to b4. Bishop c3 is forced to block the pin, and now we see the queens traded off as well. Bishop takes. And it's quite likely that these bishops will be traded off as well. So Magnus goes bishop to g4. And here I was a little bit surprised. As I was commentating on this game, I expected Hikaru to go for bishop takes b4, knight takes, and then knight to e5, hitting the bishop on g4. As knight c2 can be met with king d2. And black should not take the rook in the corner, as after knight takes g4, white has a bishop for the rook. And the knight on a1 is also going to be trapped. So white is doing great here. White's doing great. White's going to have 2 minor pieces for the rook. Black can get a pawn, but white will definitely have a big advantage. But instead, after I think Hikaru goes a3. Now Magnus takes on d2, king takes, and goes knight to a5, putting pressure on the bishop and a pawn on b3. So Hikaru goes knight e5, knight takes e4, and b takes. And again, the position is drying up more and more. Magnus has a bishop. Maybe he has a tiny advantage because these pawns can be a little bit weak, but it's not much. Bishop f5, king c3, f6, kicking the knight away, knight f3, and c5 to stop Hikaru from going knight to d4. Hikaru activates his rook, Magnus does the same, and Hikaru goes knight to e1. You might think like, hey, why is he moving the knight away? But we'll see that soon enough. After b6, he played f3, followed by e4, kicking the bishop away and gaining more space. Bishop b6, and now he goes knight to c2, aiming to go knight e3, and maybe knight e5, and if Hikaru manages to accomplish all of that, he definitely still has some chances. But here Magnus finds an excellent move. He goes pawn to f5, aiming to chip away the white pawn structure, because in case white goes knight e3, he can take, and now this pawn on e4 is quite weak. All right, so Hikaru takes, Magnus recaptures with the pawn as well, and here Hikaru plays pawn to f4, because he wants to position his knight on e3, but he doesn't want to allow Magnus to go f4 himself and kick the knight away. All right, so rook takes d1, takes rook e8, making it difficult for Hikaru to put the knight on the e-file, as it can always be under attack. So Hikaru goes rook d3, h5, Magnus gaining space on that side of the board. g3 by Hikaru, Hikaru solidifying the pawn chain, and Magnus goes rook h8, aiming to go h4. Then Hikaru goes knight e1, king e7, and knight f3. And here Magnus goes rook to d8, offering the trade of rooks. But it really feels like with the rooks off the board, this game should just be headed to a draw. Hikaru decides to keep the rooks on with rook e3, but after king f6, he's like, well, let's trade the rooks off anyway. So takes. And perhaps here Magnus might have had a very slight opportunity by going a6 here to try to go b5 on the next move. Because if black goes a6 here, it's not going to be as easy for white to go a4 to stop that. As now black has bishop d7, and white is going to have to go a5. All of this is probably still a draw, but maybe some action could have still happened. Instead, Magnus goes king e7, king c3 by Hikaru, and now goes a6. But here Hikaru is just in time to go a4. Because if Magnus is able to go b5, things can get pretty unpleasant. Let me show you guys. If let's say you go knight here, b5, takes, then Magnus can maybe walk the king in with king d6 to d5 to e4. He has this passer over here. Hikaru's majority on the king side is neutralized, and again, this does not look like a pleasant position, especially against the best endgame player of all time, Magnus Carlsen. But Hikaru finds the right move. He goes a4, stopping Magnus from expanding on the queen side. King d6, he goes knight h4, bishop here, taking the pawn, king defense, and they're kind of shuffling back and forth a little bit, but there's really nothing to be done for either player, and eventually they agree to a draw. So, as always, it was of course exciting to watch Magnus against Hikaru. This time the game ended in a draw, and hope that overall all of you guys enjoyed the video. Anyway, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow we will be live again, both on YouTube and on Twitch, covering all of the games of the Global Chess League. So I hope to see all of you guys there. And yeah, looking forward to seeing all of you in the next video.